Mr. Chairman, Administrator, welcome. Good morning. Ms. Bennett, thank you also for being here. Administrator, as you might expect, many of my questions today will involve policy issues. But first, I want to recognize and thank you for maintaining the Alaska Native Villages program at the $10 million amount in your budget request. The need in rural Alaska for wastewater improvements is enormous. I truly appreciate that you've maintained the critical program while keeping within the overall budget request that is obviously below last year's level. So thank you for that. Earlier this month, there was an editorial in the Washington Post entitled, "The EPA is Earning a Reputation for Abuse." Not a very complimentary headline there. And this was in response to statements that came to light from one of your regional administrators concerning the EPA's enforcement tactics. And the editorial states as follows, quote, "The most reasonable interpretation is also among the most disturbing, that Mr. Armendariz preferred to extract harsh punishments on an arbitrary number of firms to scare others into cooperating. This sort of talk isn't merely unjust and threatening to investors in energy projects. It hurts the EPA. The question will remain, is an aggressive attitude like the one Mr. Armendariz described common among EPA officials?" And that's the end of that quote. I raise these issues because I think these statements are somewhat consistent with some of the fears that have been expressed by some of my constituents and that I have expressed about the EPA, that it can sometimes be arrogant, use arbitrary enforcement or permitting requirements, which then in turn discourage the market from investing in critical projects that are necessary to get folks back to work, invigorate our economy. There's a couple of examples in Alaska that I will cite to that suggest that this attitude has perhaps affected the agency's work on issues within my state. You are very familiar, of course, with Shell Oil and its effort to gain the necessary permits to pursue exploring offshore there. They've spent over 5 years and $50 million pursuing air permits from the EPA for no more than 2 drill ships to operate in the Arctic OCS. At the same time, these kinds of permits were issued routinely in the Gulf of Mexico in about a 6-week period in airsheds where there are many, many more drilling rigs operating year-round and with many more communities in close proximity. As you know, I worked with my colleagues last year to transfer air permitting authority in the Arctic OCS from the EPA to the Department of Interior, who already has the permitting responsibilities within the Gulf. A second case in point is the watershed assessment for Bristol Bay. This assessment is in response to a petition to block the proposed pebble mine under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. I've heard from a lot of Alaskans on this issue. They're concerned about so many different aspects of it, from the potential development of a mine affecting our state's fisheries to the need for a fair and permitting process and the potential economic benefits of mineral development. But precisely because this is such a controversial and very complex issue, I think that the process used by the EPA must be absolutely fair and transparent. And I've been somewhat concerned about the potential for unintended consequences from such an assessment. Back in February of last year, and again just last month, I sent letters to you inquiring what would stop the assessment from being used by opponents of other non-mining development in Bristol Bay. I think that the assessment would be flawed if it doesn't contain an answer to that question. So that is something that I have asked and hope to get a firm answer on. I do want the EPA to do its job in the regular order of things. You clearly have the responsibility to protect the public health. I support that. I respect that. And I respect the passion for which you exercise your responsibility. But I do believe that it has to be done in a way that the public believes is fair and based on objective science. And I would hope that you would agree with that. Mr. Chairman, again, I thank you. Administrator Jackson, I appreciate you being before the committee today, and I look forward to our discussions later on. Thank you.